Again, for those of us that wanted to save Fannie and Freddie in terms of their securitization, I remember very well in '05 the whole debate. We had the Federal Reserve up here. We had the chairman of the Fed tell us at the time that this legislation that was in the House, would increase systemic risk. Why? Because the legislation we were trying to pass out of the House would have prevented the regulators from touching the portfolios of Fannie or Freddie. They couldn't regulate them for systemic risk. It would have prevented them from raising their capital. It would have prevented the regulators from doing anything to threaten to place them into receivership to get them back in line. No, I remember Chris Shays sitting here and asking the hands to go up in the audience, how many of you are lobbyists for Fannie and Freddie? And as he said, virtually every hand went up. That was the bill we passed into the Senate, and that is why the Treasury opposed it. That's why the Fed opposed it. That's why the Senate Republicans opposed it. That's why they put an alternative bill out of committee in the Senate in order to regulate Fannie for systemic risk. And sure enough, that's why if you pick up Congressional Quarterly in '05, you can see the Democrats in the Senate talking about preventing that bill from coming to the House floor, filibustering that bill from coming to the Senate floor. So for those of us that were here at the time involved in that debate, I remember this very vividly. The reason that it's important to me is because this collapse in housing, at least this element of what contributed to it, could have been handled had we listened to the regulators. So I want to get back to a comment for our witness, our guest here. I wanted to ask you, your predecessor, Mr. Lockhart, was of the belief that the separation of the two regulatory responsibilities, mission oversight on one hand and safety and soundness on the other, was problematic when it came to regulating the GSEs. As he put it, a separation of such responsibilities among GSE regulators helped cause their downfall. You can't really separate that. So as you know, HUD was enforcing the affordable housing goals, akin to mission oversight, and FHFA's predecessor was focusing on safety and soundness. So I was going to ask if you were agree, Mr. DeMarco, with Mr. Lockhart's testimony here before us in the House. Did the model with competing regulators also help cause their downfall?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I raise this because Congress is on the brink of applying this failed model to the rest of the financial services sector through the creation of a CFPA. It is not hard to imagine altruistic goals being pushed by this Consumer Financial Product Agency or Bureau. You can see them, how they would push those goals, you know, like the affordable housing goals, and how it could have unintended consequences. If you take the provision in the House bill that requires equal access to all products without defining equal access, clearly language like this enforced by an agency not focused on safety and soundness could raise issues down the road. And this is why regulators have told us it is better to allow the safety and soundness regulator preemption to regulate these institutions rather than set up competing regulatory agencies. As we have done many times, I would caution this body against taking this approach. I also wanted to ask you, you know, today it's widely understood that in order to grow and expand their profits, Fannie and Freddie dramatically grew their mortgage portfolios, which were funded implicitly by the government and by subsidized debt. Even then, it was understood that the retained portfolios did very little to promote affordable housing, but did a lot to benefit the shareholders and executives at the firms. Looking at where they are today, what is the purpose of the GSE's retained portfolios, other than the fact that they really can't be unloaded right now? I mean, why would they continue in the future to build up a retained portfolio? If I could ask you, Mr. DeMarco.
Certainly. So, in fact, they will not be building up their retained portfolio. We have them on a path to be reducing their retained portfolio at a rate of at least 10% per year going forward. What's going on with their retained portfolio today, sir, is when a mortgage is in a mortgage-backed security and it goes delinquent, In order to undertake a loan modification or some kind of foreclosure prevention action with that mortgage, or if the mortgage is delinquent past a certain amount of time, the mortgage needs to be removed from the security, and at that point it does need to be put on the balance sheet of the enterprises. So there's a legitimate purpose served there for those purposes, for that type of transaction. That is what we are doing with respect to the portfolio, and I've communicated that publicly and to the enterprises, that the use of their portfolio, and growth in it, is actually to have capacity to bring these delinquent mortgages onto their balance sheet so that they can actually to undertake foreclosure mitigation actions. Beyond that, sir, our goal is for the portfolios to be gradually shrinking, as I say, at a rate of at least 10% per year, and that is in the preferred stock purchase agreement between us and the Treasury Department.
Thank you, Mr.